I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Rob, do you want to do roll call?
Yes, please.
Director Diamond.
Here.
Director Hetherington.
Here.
Director Odette.
Here.
Director Rolfe.
Here.
Director Stevens.
Here.
All right, special orders of business. Adopt the resolution 2022-08 authorizing remote public meetings. Does anyone have the resolution to read?
I have the resolution. Oh, no, excuse me. Before we went on to that, I just wanted to verify with Rob that reference to Kevin Smith was removed before we vote on it.
Yes, it was.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2022-08, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District authorizing remote public meetings and to waive the readings.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Director Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
Director Odette.
Yes.
Director Rolfe.
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
All right, congratulations to Director Stevens.
Thank you.
Speech.
It was a landslide vote of 11-9 on special districts. But it was hard work getting to all the special districts, but now I have to go to Auburn every month.
I don't know that anyone knows what we're talking about.
I got elected as a permanent representative to LAFCO, the Local Area Formation Commission of Placer County, which looks at districts and formations and things like that.
Thank you for your service, Rick.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Modification of the agenda. I would like to modify the agenda by pulling the board member announcements forward. Would anyone else like to make a modification to the agenda before we do that? Okay.
Well,
Board announcements, I think Rick has something to say.
I would like to thank and congratulate the Air Show Committee and the airport staff for running a absolutely terrific air show last Saturday. And we've got some of the pictures of that were taken at the air show that is a combination of families, and it was well attended and it was safe and lots of kids, lots of families, and it was very successful. So I want to thank the air show committee, and I'd like to thank our staff for doing a great job.
I second that. It was just a breath of fresh air to have so many folks out having a great time, enjoying the show.
That's a great one.
And I love that one. The STEAM, the kids area, all of the performers, and just it just feels like after so many years of COVID and staying home, it was kind of back to normal. It was awesome. Thank you. Okay, speak your piece reminder. I would like to remind everyone to pay attention, be aware, and attend to the world and the people around you. Listen, focus on others in order to better understand their points of view. Be inclusive. Welcome all groups of citizens working for the greater good of the community. Don't gossip and don't accept when others choose to do so. Show respect. Honor other people and their opinions, especially in the midst of a disagreement. Be agreeable. Look for opportunities to agree. Don't contradict just to do so. Apologize. Be sincere and repair damaged relationships. Give constructive criticism. When disagreeing, stick to the issues and don't make a personal attack. And take responsibility. Don't shift responsibility and blame onto others. Share disagreements publicly. Okay, now's the time for public comment for anything that is not on the agenda. If anyone has public comment to make, come right up, Mike.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Mike Daniel, and I'm just letting everybody know I'll be running for the board this November. I'm super excited about it. In short, I think I'm uniquely positioned to bridge the local community with the pilot community, as I'm part of both. I was a part of the local community before I was part of the pilot community. I live on Downwind 29 for 7-8 years off of Palisades, so I'm pretty darn aware of a lot of the chatter and things going on around the community, and I think I have a pretty good eye. Attained my private pilot's license in 2018, and I've been passionate about aviation ever since. It was a new hobby for me. I didn't come from a military family, anything like that, so this is all new information, newly educated, but I can see both sides of the world, and I have concerns with things going on, conversations I hear, and I just hope I can sort of bridge that conversation and be a very solid, good voice for the community on behalf of the airport. So thanks for having me.
Great.
I look forward to meeting everybody too. There's many people I have met, many people I've seen over and over again at Red Truck and throughout town, but
All right. Thank you, Mike. John Jones.
John Jones. First, I'd like to congratulate the members of the board who voted to have the air show. It was fantastic. You should be proud of the decision you made, and there's 157 kids who got their first airplane ride Sunday, Monday, and next Saturday that are ecstatic about aviation. What I wanted to talk about, however, is this. Let's see, which one? So Runway 20, when you land on Runway 20, there's been a lot said about the fact that these flights go right over Glenshire, right? And we need to figure out how to not have those flights go over Glenshire. Well, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that
Excuse me, John, I'm sorry. Is this about the agenda item, the
No.
220? Oh, okay. Go
Nope,
ahead. Thank
it's not. One of the things I wanted to point out is that there is a published instrument approach into runway 20, and while the heading of the runway is 200, which is how the jets line up in VFR conditions, go right over Glenshire and land, if you're flying in on an instrument approach, you come in at a heading of 182, which misses Glenshire by a mile to a mile and a half. If you're flying out on instruments, you fly out on an obstacle departure procedure published that takes you out and turns you to a heading of 275, which takes you way away from Glenshire. So my mantra is the airport right now, I believe, is developing and about to implement a visual approach for runway 29, which would keep, let's get it correct, which would keep all of this traffic going over all these neighborhoods to the
Recording
west.
in progress.
All these neighborhoods to the west of the airport. It would keep them over Highway 267, starting at a point over Lake Tahoe, and you'd move at least 1,000 jets and turboprops from this corridor of homes to the corridor coming straight in to 29, over 267, and there are no homes. My question is, once this is implemented, why can't we then move to do the same thing for runway 20? And instead of moving it to 182 degrees entry, move it to 175, 25 degrees off. Bring those planes in over Boca. Yeah, if there's a published visual approach, Oakland Center will send these jets to a point in the sky that begins an approach into 20 that comes in from an angle that is way off of 200, which moves all that traffic away from Glenshire. And conversely, in instrument conditions, you can have a published standard instrument departure developed, which will take the planes off of runway 2, turn them to the left, and fly them out over Boca. And we've moved all kinds of traffic away from homes, which is what the objective of this third runway was, which, if you can't tell, I'm really not in favor of it.
President Rolfe, I apologize. We're approaching 4 minutes for the comment.
Thank you.
Ken?
Yes, my name's Ken Aronson. I am the commander for the Civil Air Patrol in Truckee. On behalf of the Civil Air Patrol, I would like to thank Commissioners Stevens, Odette, and Rolfe for voting to return the Truckee Air Show and Family Festival back to the airport. We had a good day. Although I'm a small part of what we have done, it was great to see hundreds of people donating thousands of hours to make this festival a success. Thank you. I would like to stay, but I have 12 kids I just sent to Mars, mission to Mars today, and I need to get to work. Been out there since 6 this morning. So thank you very much. We would like to do it again. We're here to work for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Gotta go.
Is there any, oh, here comes Sven.
Hi there, my name is Sven Pohl. I'm a pilot who has a hangar here at the airfield and fly in and out quite often. If I may, just hand these out. I'd like to speak briefly on why pilots depart on runway 29. I'm not going to read this entire document, and for Director Diamond, I apologize that you don't have it in front of you, but I'm happy to, there's a copy here. I'm happy to send you one as well. Director Diamond actually in a next door post did, and I quote, say, "There are too many pilots who continue to depart on runway 29 when safety doesn't require it, unnecessarily impacting the community members who live below." I'd just like to point out that that may be the case on occasion. I mean, pilots do tend to want to always seek the longest runway, but I think it's important that you all understand that when you're flying a twin-engine aircraft, the situation is quite different. You are required by FAA regulations really to understand the length of the runway and what your departure entails there. In particular, and I won't go through all of this, but I will point to the diagram on page 3. You have to consider what happens if your engine stops. And you have really two choices, in fact. One is to abort the takeoff, which requires quite a bit of runway because you would presumably do so below a particular speed. The other is to carry on with the takeoff, but that also is going to require additional runway length because, in fact, your engine isn't operating. You only have one of two engines. So as you think about why these aircraft, particularly the jets, are always departing 29, it's because they need the runway length. Now, under certain circumstances, runway 20 could work, and even the new proposed runway could work. But that really is dependent on the temperature, the density altitude, and the payload that the aircraft is attempting to take off with. Overall, as you know, the wind generally comes from this direction out of the southwest rather. That favors 29 under most circumstances. So I ask you to think about this as you start to contemplate other runways, And as importantly, I hope that you'll consider improving runway 220 before undertaking a new runway. As a pilot, I'm in favor of additional runways. I would imagine other neighbors in the neighborhood would prefer not to see that. That said, I think we should be prioritizing things like John just mentioned in terms of creating visual approaches, and we should also be thinking about and prioritizing repaving and lengthening 220. So I'm open to any questions or available after the fact, but I did want to address why twin-engine aircraft, particularly the jets, are predisposed. It's because of federal regulation, FAA regulation, that they consider and try to use the longest runway available. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Doug Collum. I'm here to talk about the topic of shutting down the glider port. Just in the way of background, my wife and I purchased our house in Truckee in 2007, about 15 years ago. For what it's worth, the house is situated right under the downwind leg of the normal air traffic pattern coming into the Truckee airport. My background, I was a business lawyer for 30 years, working with a range of both private and publicly held corporations. I've sat in on about 200 or 300 board meetings, so I know a little bit about responsible corporate governance as it relates to boards of directors. So what brings me here? There was a time when I owned a glider. Unfortunately, I had to sell it, but I've spent many hours flying out of the Truckee airport. Frankly, having the opportunity to do that was one of the reasons my wife and I decided to buy a house in Truckee. I've spent a lot of time out there, and it's a wonderful community of pilots and families and friends, and there are a lot of young kids learning aviation. It's just a very vibrant community. I was out there the other day just watching the choreography of planes coming in and taking off, and I was chatting with a lady in the office, and she said there's a proposal on the table that's being discussed to shut down the glider port through a massive rent increase. It's obviously a shoestring operation, so a rent increase like that would have the effect of basically shutting down the operation as it exists today. Which brings me to my point, maybe 2 points. First of all, I think the idea of shutting down the glider port, it just flies in the face of maintaining a vibrant community, which I understand is what you folks are about. And the notion of imposing a massive rent increase for the purpose of shutting down the glider port, for me, it's just, that is not responsible corporate governance. From where I sit, the responsibility of the board is to serve the interests of the greater community. It's not to serve the interests of special interests that exist and that don't reflect, that don't mirror to the community at large. And in its best light, I think this proposal to raise it's a massive rent increase in such a draconian way really reflects badly on the board as a board, and frankly, it also reflects badly on the community at large. So I don't know what the right answer is to the broader questions about noise reduction and safety improvements. Those are good objectives, but the responsibility, I think, of the board is to find compromise and common sense solutions. So a couple of thoughts that to me are obvious. One is to create a committee of citizens with expertise and know-how in aviation and airport operations and find a common sense solution. And whatever solution or decision the board comes up with, transparency is key. You need to be able to demonstrate how the board arrived at its decision and whether there is a rational business purpose for doing so. So on final note, I do absolutely believe in aviation safety and noise reduction. Those are laudable goals. But to me, the idea of shutting down the glider port through a massive rent increase as part of the board's decision-making, frankly, is just wrong-headed. And it paints our community as governed by petty interests. I like to think that Truckee is more than that. Enough said. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Pat Northrup, and I have lived up here since 1965, I think. I don't know, earlier than that. In any case, I got my pilot's license at this airport in 1970, and I've been in Civil Air Patrol since 1967. And so I've been through a lot of air shows. And it was really neat given we had COVID to go through, and it felt like we were back to normal again. Everybody was breathing fresh air, and it was great. I believe it pulled the community together very nicely, and it was so well attended. It was a shock that this many people came, and especially the kids. And as you probably know, there's going to be an airline pilot shortage. And so to have kids out here getting used to airplanes and getting excited about them is something that is important for us to participate in with the kids at an air show. So thank you very much for voting for it. I really appreciate that. And hopefully we can do it again next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
One more.
Okay.
I'm Ann Holmes-Delforge, and I've lived in Glenshire for 38 years. And I do have to say the last couple of years, the noise of the planes has increased exponentially. My mother lives by O'Hare Airport, and there have been a couple of mornings where I felt like I was sitting by O'Hare Airport. It has become so routine now. And so I'm very concerned, as well as my neighbors, that we're going to keep increasing our capacity here, and that's going to make our lives miserable. Most of us have lived there a long time, so we're not just moved into the neighborhood and should have known better. But, you know, we want to be good neighbors. I've used the airport. I've done medical transports out of the airport, so I have a lot of respect for it. But I would like to see us find a balance. And I do feel like last year when we were told, oh, call this number if you have noise complaints, it was like spitting into a black hole. So I'm asking you to really take into consideration the impact that you have on the community as a whole. You know, I understand that we need to provide a service to not only the community and our local pilots, but we really need to be considerate of the neighbors, and that is not happening right now. Every single morning, it is misery. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Looks like we have Tom.
Thank you, Madam President. So, I walk into McDonald's and order some food. The cost is $6. I give the clerk a $10 bill. The cashier gives me $5 $1 bills. What do? There's no law or McDonald's rule that I must give the cashier the extra $1 bill that she gave me, but there is a moral factor involved regarding keeping the dollar or giving the back to her. I would choose to give the dollar back to her. On a grand scale, let's say I'm on the board, and one year I get $38,800 in health benefits, while one of the others gets less than half of that. Another gets almost a third of that. Another gets less than 1/5 of that, and the other gets less than 1/6 of that. This supposition is actual, as can be proven with public information in a letter from TTAD to me dated 4/10/17. But anyway, let's return to the supposition. What do? There's no policy, instruction, or law that encourages me to return about $27,000. But averaging out the other four board members, how much they make, is $11,000. So 27,000 sounds good. And that makes my moral problem one of, do I blithely continue doing nothing about this inequity, or do I take it upon myself to give TTAD back $27,000 to correct the situation, making the whole situation equitable? Now comes a problem of what a person of integrity would do. And there's not much thinking about this, as such a person would return the $27,000 to the district over the next few years. Before Manager Smith moved on, I asked if the board member who received such largesse had paid anything back to TTAD. He had quite a chuckle while telling me no. The actual board member who received the huge overpayment is running for re-election, and that person is not the airport board president, Rolf. Guess who I am not voting for? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone on the Zoom call who would like to make public comment?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me? This is Debbie Cohen.
Yes.
And I'm going to hold off on video due to my internet coverage. And thank you for your time. So I'd like to start with an important point is that the airport provides significant economic benefit to the district, not the other way around, as some board members have been messaging to the community. And to support my point, I'd like to cite a few data points from the September 2018 economic study that was performed for the 2017 operating year, in case some are not familiar. So, one, this was an objective, extremely professional study based on conventional economic impact analysis practices and utilized industry standard input-output modeling frameworks. This is a very sophisticated study. So based on the results, in 2017, the airport generated more than $73 million in user-related spending, 10 times more than what was received. Today, 4 or 5 years later, given the growth in the district, these numbers have likely doubled. Every dollar spent operating the airport yields an additional $5.50 spent in the district economy. And again, that's above the direct spending of the airport. Airport user homes, also not included in the 73 million number, generate additional 14 million in annual property tax revenues used for school districts, the counties, and municipalities. A tax funding inflow-only view promoted by some board members is, in my opinion, very narrow and not reflective of best practice, common sense economic analysis. You need to look at both inflows and outflows. Additionally, a board member's recent social media post appears to challenge this study with its mention of what-if scenarios based on the airport no longer operating. This no airport scenario is extremely unlikely in the foreseeable future given the current state of FAA grants to the airport and other district laws. Social media posts with this type of messaging, in my opinion, serve only as political theater and teasing the Truckee community with misinformation. And in closing note, the economic study also included, proper economic analysis of a no airport scenario. I'd like to ask to drive sensible, fiscally responsible solutions to reduce noise and improve safety, and also other activities that really strengthen the airport and overall community partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, is there any more public comment? I don't see any hands.
Hey, Kat, this is David. I just wanted to draw attention to a public comment that we got an email that I wondered if the board had any interest in pursuing, and that was that one about the location of the TART buses. Is there something we could do about that to get those out of that neighborhood? If I wanted to see if the board was interested in finding out anything more about that. That came from Colin Butcher, I think was the commenter.
I think it was Colin. I think we should wait until the presentation. Maybe once we are on that agenda topic, we could talk about that.
I don't think that is an agenda topic.
Well, it is part of, yeah, good question. I mean, it's part of the discussion of the L-shaped property.
No, I think he was just asking about whether or not the buses could be stored at the airport grounds as opposed to in their neighborhood. I think there's the discussion about the park.
I believe David is correct. It was a separate public comment. And
the question I think would just be whether we'd like us to agendize that for August.
For August.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So would you like us?
I think it's going to be part of this larger conversation. Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely. And maybe, yeah, not until August. Just a reminder, for those who sent email public comment, we do not, oh, there's Colin Butcher. Why don't you weigh in, Colin? I see your hand up.
Good evening. Sorry, my service just dropped out. It was a separate item. The TARP buses drive through our neighborhood, the Ponderosa Fairway Estates, with frequency. As you can imagine, the drivers have to drive through to retrieve their buses, and then they exit out to go run their bus routes. And so each driver, that's 4 trips a day. Unfortunately, I don't know how many buses they have, but it is quite frequent. And with the addition of the TARP Connect, we're seeing quite a few trips through our neighborhood, which, as you on the board know, we're directly impacted by flight traffic, and wondering if it would be a logical solution and a way to help our neighborhood out in housing the TARP buses at the airport property.
Thank you, Colin. I was going to say, for those who emailed their comments, we don't have time during the meeting to read those aloud, but every single one of them has been read by all the board members, and they will all be attached to the minutes when the minutes are posted. So they will be memorialized. So thank you for everyone who took the time to write to us.
Can I just ask just a follow-up question on that? Because I did think about this as a matter of process. When somebody's in person and leaves a public comment, we have in the past discussed that we wanted staff to take action on that. And I don't know how we would do that with an emailed comment, because we would not be able to discuss it legally unless we did it in an open meeting. So is that a kind of unexpected consequence of the emailed comments, that we cannot discuss them? We can't even discuss if we want them on an agenda because we can't discuss them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Director Diamond, I think that's a really good point. And I think, I appreciate actually how you just handled that. If during the public comment period, if there's a emailed public comment that you feel is one that direction should be provided to staff, or we should agendize it as we would an in-person public comment, that now would absolutely be the appropriate time to do that.
I think that's something also we can talk at the board workshop next week when we're talking about board processes. Just making sure that everybody's comment is heard in the appropriate space. Okay.
But so on this particular topic, did we decide we don't want staff to look into this? I would like them to look into it. I don't know if there's 2 others that would like that.
Yes.
Yes. I would
That's
look
3.
into that.
So I think based on that, we'll agendize it for August, and I'll work with Mr. Ettenheimer to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there were some other concerns that were in those emails around the same traffic and the noise in that same neighborhood. And so there might be some other things we want to look into as well for August. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Consent agenda. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay. Roll call?
Director Diamond?
Yes.
Director Hetherington?
Yes.
Director Odette?
Yes.
Director Rolfe?
Yes.
Director Stevens?
Yes.
Carries.
So we have a special presentation from Truckee Donner Recreation and Park District. I'm going to, because we can't respond to public comment in a public meeting like this, I'd like to invite anyone who would like to make public comment about the special presentation ahead of the presentation, because if you have comments and concerns, that they might be answered during the presentation. So if there's any public comment on the L-shaped parcel, feel free to come to the mic. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Thank you. My name is Laurel Lippert. I have been in Truckee for 45 years, my husband even longer. I learned to fly here and flew small airplanes out of our airport for 30 years. We've lived on the Ponderosa Golf Course 1 mile from the departure end of Runway 29 for 15 years. The proposed TDRPD park on airport property is adjacent to our neighborhood. The problem with this idea is that it would greatly impact those of us who live on Reynolds Way, Martis Drive, and Estates Drive. From the map we've studied, it appears that the road access to and from this park would be via our narrow unlined roads, which now have only local traffic, people walking daily all year long with their kids, dogs, and friends safely every hour. Our neighborhood is impacted by airport noise now more than ever. This park could add road traffic, noise, and serious safety concerns. If you haven't been here, please walk or drive on our streets, past single-family homes near the roads, and the Truckee Donner Senior Apartments on the Estates Drive, and imagine how this project would change them in a negative way. We're not opposed to parks for kids in our community, and we really appreciate the Truckee Donner Recreation and Parks Department. But this location is wrong. We care for the Truckee Tahoe Airport and support it as a vital part of this community. It's generous of the airport to offer it to the TDRPD, but this is not the right place. With the population doubled in Truckee now, increasing traffic on the ground and in the air, we need to preserve open space when it is vital to our safety and peace of mind. And I am just one of many neighbors who feel this way, so thank you.
Thank you, Laurel.
And I thank you, Laurel. Well put. I fully support what Laurel just said. Now, this is a park for some ball diamonds from what I've seen in the board packet. I'm assuming that the Rec and Parks District is going to explain how they're going to fund this thing. My question is, are they coming to the well to get some more golden eggs? This district has given Rec and Parks almost $1 million to put a roof on a swimming pool. That's $1 million. I think they should find the money if elsewhere. If they're coming to ask you for money, I recommend that you say, no, not this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I see Judge Andy.
Hello, Kat. I'm kind of in an awkward position here, and the reason I mention that is I came here hoping to know more about the proposal by the Park and Rec District, who I generally support, before I make a comment. I do have concerns, but I'm in the dark. I learned about this for the first time yesterday, and there are a lot of things about the project that I just need to know more about. And I would like to ask you to reconsider this idea of making comments before their presentation so we could listen to it, and then when we know more, then make some comments.
I can make an exception for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, is there any more public comments? Okay.
Hey, Kat.
Oh, yeah, who's that? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's Paige. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me okay? Hey, I'm the same with Andy. I would like to see and hear what's going on before I put my input. But I definitely want to, I'm hoping that if this area is considered, you guys really think about creating a different route and not through our neighborhood, because again, like Colin just said, I've had to, strain to hear you guys at least 4 times as 4 planes flew over our house. So just more traffic than we already have is just, it's just too much for our little neighborhood. But again, like Andy, I'll let you guys finish and then I'll have more to say probably.
Thanks, Paige. Okay, I can't see hands
We
right
have-
now, so if you have something, if you're on Zoom, you can go ahead and speak.
Let's go with Todd Babarovich.
Oh.
Hi, thank you. I am speaking out against this proposal on a number of different reasons. The first, you've already heard about the traffic that this would bring, especially during large events. This neighborhood and these streets were not designed for that at all. And I know just from my own experience in attending events at Riverview, you cannot expect everybody to abide by the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. There's a lot of traffic that comes through here today that is already going in excess of that amount. So I don't believe it is at all safe, and I don't believe that there would be mitigations to make it safe. And then I'm also concerned that part of the land that is being looked at here, when I first came to this community and engaged with the airport, Hardy made it a special point that he had worked hard on preserving that land, and I know a lot of work has gone into that to restore it. But this process would probably result in the removal of 100 to 200 trees and a lot of grading. That is not flat land in there. There are some flat sections, but to have a soccer field or other ball field is going to require extensive grading, quite an upset to the environment that we have there. And just as another example, that I'd like to hear from the Parks and Recreation Department, and looking at the schedules that they've chosen to include in the presentation, only covers the time of day from 4 to 6:30 p.m. and in some cases, I believe 7:30. And the schedule does look very crowded during those times. Again, my own experience is those fields at Riverview lay vacant the vast majority of the day. It does not appear that there is the volume anywhere near the capacity that we have that would require 3 new ball fields. I strongly, regardless of what we're about to hear in the presentation, I strongly encourage you all to not consider this as a location. It appears we have a lot more room, especially down Jager, past the current Riverview Park, that you could even go farther down, and I would be happy to support a mega super complex that is away from all residential neighborhoods in the same general area as that current location. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd.
Sarah Kane.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Sorry to not turn my video on, but I just want to echo most of what Laurel said, that, and again, it'd be nice to be able to hear the presentation to see if we're all wrong about this, but it appears that the only access to this complex is going to be going down Reynolds Way and Marta Strada Estates. And I just picture the sports park on a busy weekend with, visitors and spectators, and I mean, how many car trips is that going to be? 100? More than that? In the airport, you guys bought land to preserve as open space to prevent further development that could be impacted by airport noise. And on your mission statement, you also talk about reducing impacts on airport neighbors while providing sustained benefit to the region. And I do think that we need more sports parks with our growing population. That's definitely a benefit to the community, but routing hundreds of vehicles a week through a neighborhood that's already so impacted by airport traffic, that's not consistent with your stated goals and your mission statement. Again, I'm glad to see agencies working together. I think that parks in general is a great use of airport open space. And just, to think forward to more or consider this more, if the park and rec district needs more space, what about moving some of the less intensive activities to that space down there, the L Park, things like the community garden or I know they want to move the disc golf course, and then you could put the more car and vehicle intensive activities back over in the park during the remodel. Or even further thinking, what about revisiting purchasing some lots in the PC3 parcel behind the old winery for this purpose? It's already flat, it wouldn't require grading, there's already a road that goes in from Brockway. It could benefit the community and the park district, our neighborhood, and you guys. And I look forward to hearing the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
Gretchen Corbin.
Hi, this is Gretchen. I want to echo what my previous neighbors have said about the traffic in the area. I also think it's a little premature to ask for comments ahead of the presentation when the presentation really is just a bunch of images without any text explaining the proposal. But my biggest concern that hasn't already been voiced is the seasonal stream that runs underneath one of the proposed athletic fields. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when all that work was done for the Truckee Meadows wetlands. And this seasonal stream is a downstream flow of that wetlands that happens during runoff. And I'm not sure where that would go, but one of the things in the proposal is a parking lot that is literally on top of a holding pond, a seasonal pond that holds sediment so that it does not flow into the Truckee River. So if you are even going to consider this, I think you need to seriously consider the environmental impacts as well as the neighborhood impacts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dietrich Schultz.
Hey, thank you. So I'm going to echo a lot of what's been said. So I wholeheartedly support quality public facilities, as everyone does. I believe placing a complex like this in the middle of a small residential neighborhood spells disaster. The only vehicular access to the proposed areas are narrow residential streets lined with many families with young children who often seen playing on or near the street. We already have issues with vehicles going too fast. This proposal would bring a huge increase in traffic, likely bumper-to-bumper traffic during busy times, right through a residential neighborhood. In addition to traffic, a facility like this brings noise and trash, neither of which is conducive to the health of our community. Their proposal, that is Parks, doesn't discuss hours of operation. Are they considering adding lights for extended hours? The airport already has a good neighbor policy limiting flights from 7 to 10 or to 7 to 10. So it's clear that you care about your neighbors. I'm disappointed that there's been no communication on this proposal from the Parks Department to the neighborhood. I won't venture a guess why, but it doesn't bode well for having them as a future neighbor. Their proposal would put one field in the narrow green belt to the south. If you've been there, you'll know that this area is sloped and would require extensive grading. Not to mention that the seasonal creek that Gretchen mentioned drains the wetlands of Brockway, and that would be destroyed and have to be routed, I guess, through a culvert. The existing park facilities on Brockway are perfectly located with easy access off an existing arterial road and no residences nearby. The Riverview Sports Park is similarly located on a suitable road with no residences nearby. Surely the city can do better than shoehorn a large park into a residential neighborhood. I applaud the airport district for being a good neighbor to date. You supported the restoration of the watershed and the creek that flows from the wetlands on Brockway to the Truckee River. You thinned the trees and vegetation in this area, showing you're responsible land managers. I'm confident you won't allow this ill-considered proposal to go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's it? Okay. I'll hand it over to the Parks and Rec Department presentation. Thank you.
Steve Randall, General Manager, Truckee Donna Recreation and Park District. Appreciate the public comments. It has always been our plan to go to the neighborhood if we have some sort of proposal that can happen. We're always looking to expand our inventory, our parks for grass, for various sports are overcrowded. We can't keep up with the amount of use that they have. What we're looking for in a nutshell tonight really is if you would entertain something like this. We're not looking for approval. We're just looking to get basically your temperature on something like that. If you were to say absolutely no, then it dies at that point. If you say you're interested in looking at it, then we start doing all the procedural steps that we need to do. We would never just shoehorn a park without public comment. This is going to take a lot of public comment. We're quite aware of the neighborhood. We have some ideas for alternative transportation into the neighborhood. So I'll leave it at that. John Schaefer is the park superintendent. He'll give you a little bit of presentation, but really at the end of the day, is this something you would entertain? If so, we will go through all the processes that we need to go through.
Hello, board members. John Schaefer, Park Superintendent for Truckee Donna Rec and Park. Here's a little background on how we've gotten to this point. So obviously we're in the recreation business. Do you have the? Let's go to the. So I'm putting up some schedules, so we can go through those schedules pretty quick. The next one too. So our demand has outgrown our supply of fields. What we're doing is we're looking for more space to try to accommodate the demand. Go ahead, Laura. So what we've tried to, on our part, is just putting more sports on the same fields. So it gets a little confusing. We tried putting 3 different sports on a field, and it gets a little confusing, and that didn't work. So here's our dilemma. We had a field assessment done earlier this summer, and the basic recommendation was we need more fields. These fields don't get any downtime, so this is what we're left with these past few years. Go ahead. Next one. So what properties we do have left, so what we've decided, the Park and Rec District, is we're going to start $1 million project here at Regional Park. We're going to move both these infields. Well, the ones to the left is already at the perimeter. The one on the infield on the right will be moved to the other perimeter so that we're sitting outfield to outfield. And so that will allow us to put a multi-use field inside of that, and that will help alleviate some of it, but it doesn't give us the amount of supply of fields that our demand warrants. So I reached out to Blake Trisana at the Sanitary District and asked him, my original thought was the properties on the other side of the Sanitary District's offices out there off of Jorga Road, they're saving those for other purposes. So he shot me this email, and so this is what they had available. So this is what they had available. This piece here is just right over the river, so that doesn't really work. This piece had potential. It's not real large. You could put a U10 field on it, but that's about all you can fit on there. So after looking at this piece here and finding out it was the airport district's property, I approached Hardy probably 5 months ago about it. We walked it a little bit, and he thought there might be some potential, but I would need to come to his board. Let's go to the next screen. I put this up just to give it some proximity of, so right here is the old town courtyard. We're likely going to move in there within a year or so. And it just, if we did a park here, it just gives us great proximity to all of our other facilities in the area. So that's why I thought it might be a good location for us. Next slide. So here's basically what we came up with. And I knew there would be, both Hardy and I both talked about it, about how this neighborhood would be impacted tremendously. So we also talked about coming in, the rodeo grounds is over here, coming in that road down past the PUD substation and in through this. This would be a better route to come into these fields and stuff like that. So that's where I'm at to date, and it's just a conceptual kind of thing. So.
Okay, can we go to the last slide, please?
This one?
No. You were on right here. This is not on here. It is.
Yeah, there you go.
It's purple, I can't see it. We see it. Here, it's green one. I can see green. Right? So what you're talking about is doing this right here.
Yes.
And if you're coming in this way and going through these neighborhoods, I've driven these streets a lot, and they are very small. And as I recall, there was a plane crash in here.
I hate to interrupt, but can you please turn on your microphones? I'm having a hard time hearing everybody but the presenter, excuse me.
Okay, I've turned my mic on.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So we're talking about right here, and I'm very sympathetic of not bringing people through these neighborhood streets. I've driven them a lot. I've driven up the dirt road up to the old winery site. These are very small roads, and I'm not very excited about doing this if it's coming through the neighborhoods. Now, maybe there's something where you could come through here, but I'm not keen. I'm sorry, I'm sympathetic to this neighborhood.
Well, sure.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's why we thought staying away from this entrance here and bringing it in by the rodeo grounds might be a better option. There's less impact.
That would seem more attractive.
Yeah.
But you don't want to put more traffic on these people's roads. The roads are really, I'm sorry, Laurel, they're substandard. But you know that better than me.
Teresa.
Yeah, I think this is a good one. There's no way I can support any of this if they come through even over here. You got to put some sort of off-ramp right here to get my support for any of that. It can't go through that neighborhood. Those guys carry the lion's share of what we're talking about. So that increases your cost if you're going to do something like that. But that's the only way that I would be remotely interested in it. That's it.
I agree. I think this community suffered the impacts of that jet crash a year ago yesterday. They hear virtually every aircraft that departs off of runway 29 or lands on runway 29 setting up for traffic pattern. They are just in the thick of it. And I'm just sensitive to what we're hearing from their community, and just for people at home to recognize that what we're hearing in live public comment today is a fraction of the emailed public comment we got. It sort of makes me wonder about, I know that Steve, you talked about talking to Blake over at TTSA, but there's a lot of land over there, and we've tried to negotiate for some of it, and I wonder if collectively, if a few agencies, including town of Truckee, went back to TTSA and said, let's get serious about what's going to happen with this land, we might be able to come up with some solutions that work for a lot of things. So that's just my take on this.
My comment is, yeah, there's 2 fields here, and then there was a field here. And if this became my backyard with kids, I mean, I love kids, and we lived, soccer was our life for many years. And then over here was pickleball courts, I assume, or tennis courts. And it's one of the sports I want to take up. But when I've been around it and hearing that plink, plink, plink all day, that could make people, and on top of the street aspect, I'm having heartburn with this.
Thanks. I echo everyone's sentiments here. I'm also concerned about the stream and the runoff and the history of the place that apparently was designated open space. And I agree with David. There is a lot of land around that just takes that traffic away from this neighborhood that really just can't support that kind of invasion.
Steve, we've been a big supporter of your agency, both with the golf course, with the roof at the Parks and Rec, but it sounds to me like you've got a 5-0 vote against you.
Sounds like it.
So rethink it.
Okay.
I do want to add to echo on with, there's hundreds of acres off of Jorga Road, and they want that buffer, but this is where we as agencies need to work together to solve these things. And this public input can also reach to those boards as well to say, if we really need it, loosen up 20 acres.
Right.
For the good of the community.
I agree. Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Is there any public comment after the presentation now?
Since you're kind enough to just grant me a brief exception, this is kind of a what-if session, and I appreciate the need to go through the what-if analysis. I respect Park and Rec for coming up with a conceptual thing. And in order to really give us a good feel for exactly what they're doing, they'd have to invest a considerable amount of money. And then in doing that, some of the concerns that are being floated here would come up and perhaps waste money that could be used in another venture. 2 quick thoughts. You've done a fabulous job cleaning up that space that's adjacent to Truckee Pines. It's a wonderful buffer. It's great open space. Truckee Pines is a very necessary part of Truckee. It's an integral part of town, but it's densely packed. When you go down Estates Drive, you'll see 15 cars just parked out in that meadow, not in it, but adjacent to it, right next to Estates Drive. And so anything you can do to minimize the impacts the community continues to absorb is going to be greatly appreciated. I'm very sympathetic to the need for fields, and my family and myself, we've used them all and will continue to use them. But right now, as I think I've heard from others, I think this is just not looking to be the right spot. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Does anyone else have a comment before we move on?
Hey, Kat.
Is that Paige?
Yeah, it's Paige again. I just want to thank you all very much for hearing us and listening and understanding. Because on my way home from work, I was driving Reynolds to Martis Drive, and these kids on an electric bike, two with an electric bike, going up towards us from Reynolds to Martis Drive. We're going to turn onto Rosa Court with their dog to the left of them, and if anybody had been going any more traffic than we already had, they probably all three would have been killed. So I just appreciate you listening and supporting our town, or our neighborhood. So that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Kat, could I add something to this? I'm just wondering, in the spirit of actually not dropping the ball on this while Steve is there any interest from Steve and from the rest of the airport board in our two agencies jointly coming up with an official request for TTSA to sit down with us and discuss better uses for that land back there?
Sure. Yes.
Steve says yes.
How about my board mates?
Agree.
I'd say I would task Rob with that, but yes.
Yep, I agree. Rick?
I agree.
Mike.
I agree. I think it'd be great use. I'm a little nervous about TTSA and their desires, and I really want to get that land exchange done. And I know that they haven't been very sympathetic in the past to uses on their property. So I certainly can give it a try. So yes, with concern.
All right, anything else? Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Let's see. Action items. Placer County Grand Jury Report District Response. You want to take that one, Josh?
Yes, please. So this item is to consider a potential response to the recent grand jury report from Placer County Grand Jury regarding the airport. So before we kind of dive into what the report came out with, just maybe a little bit of introduction to the process for members of the public who may not be that aware of it. So each county has a civil grand jury, which is empowered to investigate local public agencies in whatever issues they feel are of importance. And through that process, they will generally prepare a report which indicates their findings. And those findings can include recommendations for agencies to implement. And the grand jury can't force a local agency, one of the investigated agencies to comply with those recommendations or agree with their findings. But by law, the agency is required to provide a formal response to the grand jury, essentially indicating whether they, for a finding, agree or disagree or partially agree, and for a recommendation, whether they agree, and if so, when it would be implemented. So we did recently receive the grand jury's report, which has been posted on their websites, available publicly, which looked into the airport district's budgeting process, and then also additionally how we handled public comments or concerns related to noise abatement. The report is included in the packet, and I think the first thing I would say is it's a very positive report. I mean, I think the title of it in some sense says it all. It's the Truckee Tahoe Airport, a model Truckee Tahoe Airport District, a model airport. In particular on the two issues that the grand jury focused on, one related to budgeting. They determined that the district's budgeting is well managed and transparent, and on community concerns, determined that there were effective controls in place to receive citizen comments and response to citizen concerns. The grand jury did have one recommendation, and recommended by the end of this year that the board of directors enhance the budget process to provide the public with additional transparency related to the use of FAA grant funds, and for that to be essentially specifically identified in the budget itself. worked with Mr. Edmeyer and President Rolfe to put together a proposed response to the grand jury, which is also included in your packet, which generally thanks the grand jury for their efforts, and then in particular in response to the recommendation, agrees with it and indicates that staff will work along with the board to have that implemented during this budget cycle, which would be that timeline requested by the grand jury. This is officially the board's response. So it's before you tonight for consideration and any edits you have. And if the board is comfortable with it, we would request a motion to approve it, and then it'll be sent off to the grand jury. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
How did this get started? This random thing, or did somebody complain about it?
So we don't know that, but generally these are either from the grand jury itself or in response to a citizen complaint.
And you don't know what?
No, so the grand jury, so the report is a public document, but their internal process is confidential.
Thank you.
I have a comment on the actual report. It's kind of a question. I know they don't probably answer these questions, but second paragraph of noise abatement said, although some pilots have requested an increase in the number of hangars, the addition of hangars is not a priority to this board. According to persons interviewed, increasing the number of hangars would increase the number of planes utilizing the airport, resulting in a higher level of noise. And I don't agree with that. And nobody asked me the question. So I'm wondering who was interviewed and who's speaking on behalf of the board, saying this board doesn't want more hangars.
So their interview process is confidential, and those that are interviewed can't disclose that. I would just indicate that if the board wished, we could, even though that's not a recommendation or a finding that we're required to respond to, we could include that in our response if we wanted to clarify that.
We don't need to dig deeply into it. I just wanted to go on the record by saying I don't think that more hangars equates more noise.
Didn't our aviation forecast from last year specifically state that? I thought it did.
It did.
Perhaps.
Mead
I still don't
Hunt's-
agree.
Mead and Hunt's report said more hangars means more operations. It said it.
Great. That's why we have consultants. I still don't agree.
Okay.
That was it.
Josh, what if, say, a year from now, there's a similar complaint with the FAA and they pass it off to Placer County?
Yep.
Are they required to investigate this all over again, or?
They are not. So the law, gives a substantial amount of discretion to the civil grand jury. They can investigate, whatever they're interested in investigating. So they could decide to look at this issue again or look at a different issue related to the airport district, but they're not required to. And I would say that, this is the only instance that they've been, investigated the district since I've been involved.
Oh, okay.
I can say when I was board president, I remember doing one of these. I don't remember what the issue was, but it came to me in the mail and we had to address it. And so
it was when in the Connected newsletter, Jim Morrison was done as an interview, and we got slapped with a fine because you cannot. Could be interpreted as, backing him as one as compared to another. The idea with Connected was that we were going to do each board member, but the grand jury said you can't do that.
That was an FPPC investigation, not a grand jury.
There
The
you
last
go.
grand
I'm
jury
corrected.
report we received, the grand jury was investigating websites on special districts and to see if we had all the right pages and if it was clear for the public to get access easily.
Thank you for fixing what I said. I was wrong.
All right. Does somebody want to, do we have any public comment before we make a motion? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to approve this letter?
I move we approve the letter.
I'll second it.
Director Diamond.
Yes, and well done on the letter.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
Director Odette.
Yes.
Director Rolfe.
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
Okay. The Runway 220. Do you want to update us on that, Rob?
Yes, I'm prepared to do that. In your board package, some materials for the public as well. There's a staff report to further the conversation on reconstruction design for runway 220 scheduled currently for next fiscal year and calendar year. We have an opportunity now to, in the design, take into consideration future widening of runway 220 from 75 feet to 100 feet by accommodating a offset crown is the FAA's term for that. And there is an advisory circular for the FAA that defines exactly what the specifications for that offset crown would be. Our airport engineer has looked at that and is prepared to design an offset crown according to these standards in order to accommodate perhaps a future decision on the part of the airport district here to widen the runway at our cost at a future date. And that's what's outlined in this presentation here. So the action for the board at this point would be whether or not you would like to provide guidance to include that offset crown in the design according to the FAA specifications for a runway, and provide that guidance. I'll provide that guidance to our engineer so he can design it and submit that to the FAA for review.
You don't want a motion, you want guidance?
I believe guidance is fine.
Well, I'd like to guide you to do what you're suggesting. And we're just talking about the reconstruction of 220 as it is, same width, length, etc., just with this offset crown. So I think that, you know, what you're planning to do is a good idea.
Thank you.
I agree.
I'm good with it.
David? David?
Oh, yeah, I actually, speaking as a pilot, I was a little bit concerned about this because I was afraid if the offset was too much that we might have a safety issue with aircraft landing there and then pilots not being prepared for one side, like basically a downslope kind of thing. There's two things about it. One is that if anything, given when we do, 51% of the time, as we know, winds are calm at Truckee, but when they do blow from a direction that is typically for aircraft landing on runway 20, which is the runway coming from the direction of Reno, it's coming off of the right side. So this actually would, if anything, it would benefit that. I did want to get some other pilot opinions, and I emailed Chris Barbera, Kevin Sloan, Kevin Quinn, and Sarah Hallis. Kevin and Sarah are CFIs. They did not respond to me. Chris Barbera did respond and agreed that he doesn't see any kind of a safety concern here, so long as the, quoting, the grade of the crown is no more than what we currently have there. So I tend to agree with that. I don't really see a problem with this. I want to go on the record. Nobody has convinced me that lengthening and widening that runway is a good idea. But I do recognize what we're looking at right now is that it makes more sense to do that proactively now in the interest of continued research into the master plan when we get to that point. Of figuring out what options we do have. This is an option that is on the table, and in the interest of fairness to all of the options that are on the table, I would support just going ahead with this.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I think we should move forward with it. Is there any public comment about this issue? Any pilots want to weigh in? Besides David. Oh, Tom.
In reference to the crown, I've landed in runways all across the nation, and I've never had a problem because I never given any thought to a crown. And a crown can't be so bad that it would affect the actions of an aircraft having landed at a high speed on that runway. I think it's like are you even talking about the crown? It's nuts. FAA's not going to let you put a 4-foot crown or a 2-foot crown or a 1-foot crown in there. It's, yeah, all you need is drainage. And that's why you crown it. So get the water off the runway, get the melted snow and ice off the runway. It's nuts.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. All right, anybody else? Do you have what you need, Rob?
Yes, I take that as guidance to proceed with design, including an offset crown as presented. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Board committee assignments and ad hoc committee reports. Mountain Housing Council report.
No comment.
Workforce Housing Joint Powers Authority. Lauren?
Yeah. We met in July. Emily Vitus reviewed the status so far of agencies responding to the employee survey. We were the winner. We had the most so far. I think we're right at 66%. And she requested at least a 40% response rate. And she did highlight that the Workforce Housing Agency has assumed the responsibility of their long-term housing rental program site. It was administered by Landing Locals previously, and they proposed that the Workforce Housing assume that responsibility, run the website. They're still using a property manager to handle all of the finer details, but when it comes to notifying member agency employees, they're going to be running it, and they're excited about that. So the board passed that proposal, and it starts as a pilot program and will run through the 2022-2023 fiscal year. And she did note that the leases that are secured through the program will run beyond the program timeline. So if it doesn't work out with the Workforce Housing Agency administering that program, people won't need to worry about their leases being affected. And I attached further details about the long-term housing program to this report. If you have any further questions, you guys are more than welcome to contact me or contact Emily directly. She loves talking about housing.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Lauren?
I'm just curious, how, like, to date with our housing efforts, how many workforce housing solutions or I guess units have been created? Do we know?
I don't know offhand, but I can get that to you. I know Emily has spoken about it previously, but I just don't have that data. I could email that to you, David, if you wish.
I would just like to know, like, just do we feel like are we on track with this? Or is it not delivering what we were hoping? What more could we do? This is like, I say it because I feel like this is like one of the biggest issues for our region. So I want to make sure that it's not just like, you know, something we participate in. If there's anything more we could be doing, maybe we look into that.
Yeah. So the housing agency is currently working on their strategic plan. For the last 2 years, they've been starting up, and they've counted every successful match as a huge success, because housing is such a huge issue here and has gotten even more difficult in the last 2 years since they were formed. We believe if we create the strategic plan and they want to create a housing fund, that those funds can help start up a possible development, things agencies that can all go in on and construct. It's kind of the world's our oyster, but they're still planning that. But it's really, really difficult. And I've had many conversations with Emily where she feels like, I'm not doing enough. But every employee that has been placed in housing would rave about that because we help them find access to those homes. We would like to do more.
I would say that there have been successes, but they're small, and there's a lot more to do, and I just don't, it's so hard to get it done. You know, the fact that we committed $800,000 for 20 units and that developer couldn't get approval by the town of Truckee. So he's given up, so we quit. And then we put $500,000 into Dollar Point Crossing, and gee, there's nothing happened. And that was in 2018. And they're still working on their plans and their environmental. So, you know, we put some effort into it and some money, and we just haven't seen the results, and it's disappointing. That's my comment.
Two comments in that the Dollar Crossing, you know, we put $500,000 up, but it has not, we don't, if nothing happens, that money comes back to us. It's in escrow essentially.
I believe something will happen. It's just I'm wondering if it's going to happen in my lifetime.
I just wanted to be clear that that money is not necessarily gone until there is a project. The other thing is asking Lauren, maybe in the report on these workforce housings, if you can give us some numbers next time to just kind of that, so we get like, yay, there was one.
No, yeah, I totally can, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, master plan project and hangar use policy happens to be the same ad hoc board members. Do you have anything to report on either of those?
No, we haven't taken any action since our last board meeting when we discussed suspending these projects.
Okay. General manager recruitment ad hoc committee, nothing to report.
We'll have information next month.
Okay, information next month. Climate Transformation Alliance report. Mark Lamb and I went to the launch of the CTA. It was very well attended. It was in this room. We had representatives from the town, the PD, North Star, Sierra Business Council, Nevada County. I got to sit next to Hardy. Visit Truckee Tahoe, Contractors Association of Truckee Tahoe. And it was basically the kickoff to this alliance. We broke out in sessions and did some brainstorming on different issues around how to deal with waste and composting, what kinds of solutions for transportation were green, and it was a great kickoff. And our next steps are to start pulling in more stakeholders and getting them interested. So Rob and I spoke to the Rayleigh's rep yesterday, and she was very interested in what we were doing and sharing what they're doing. So that's how it's going. Yeah, it's moving along. It's good. ACT attendance by board of directors. We had a good ACT meeting last time about the air show. David Love did a great job. And I don't know what the next topic is. Do we have something on?
Sustainability.
Oh, sustainability, okay.
Airport sustainability planning.
Oh, okay. And that's for August.
August 10th.
August 10th?
August 10th is the day for that. So looking for 2 volunteers.
I will be at LAFCO, my first meeting as a permanent representative, so no, sorry.
So you can't miss it.
Who was at the last one? Where are we at on the cycle?
It was Kat and Teresa last month,
Yep.
last meeting, and just looking for volunteers other than Rick for August.
I'm always a volunteer. If there's nobody to go, I will always be there.
Yeah.
Since you're climate transformation, shouldn't you be there?
I think I should. It'd be great. All right.
So Kat and David. And I will send you reminders for that.
And I think that's part of a master plan that the FAA has kind of encouraged people to include, that a sustainability plan.
It is,
part
right.
of the master plan.
Right.
Yeah, it's part of the FARs.
Seemed appropriate.
I'm wondering, because there was so much public interest in that L-shaped property, and there some issues came up with in the emails. If we do want to have some discussion around the TART that we subsidize, and maybe we should be looking at some of those things and have more of a Q&A so people can participate. And
Don't you think TART, they should approach TART and then TART would come to us? Isn't that the normal sequence of events?
yes.
I'll look into the TART and
Maybe
see
we
if it's
could-
appropriate to add any of that to the
Yeah.
meeting. If not, we can have it as a separate agenda for the next one.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, management team reports. General managers report. Rob.
Thank you. So I don't know if you have that file to bring up on the screen, but just start off, I like to talk about the district mission on a regular basis. If you know me by now, I'll continue to keep that at the forefront of our conversations. It helps us provide us directions of what we're working on and what we're focused on, and what we're constantly bouncing our ideas and thought processes off of. So while the ACT meeting is about this next month about airport sustainability planning, I tried to take a moment to map those 4 quadrants in that item number 2 of the broad concepts of sustainability planning for an airport back to our mission statement by color code there. Just to give everybody an idea of how I see placing those different elements of our mission statement in those sustainability buckets that you see, those 4 different things we look at. We're getting ready to go into a budget process here, not too distant future, and this is graphically a way to represent the different elements of what the airport's working on that cuts across everything we do. And I think it's a really good tool to use. As Mary mentioned a minute ago, it's something the FAA is starting to roll out in a greater sense and encouraging airports to think about their planning in these terms across the country. And I think it's a great time for us to look at that and bring that on board, not only our master plan update, but just our regular conversations around what we're doing, how we're budgeting, and how we're thinking about our impact on this community. Whether that's a social impact, a natural resources impact, how we're looking at our operational efficiencies here as an airport district itself with our own staffing or our services, internal processes, how we're engaging our community at large and how we're looking for that feedback on a regular basis. And of course, how we're saving money for the future. If we have plans to deliberately do things in the future, what is our deliberate effort to put aside money, reserve money at a much greater rate, I would suggest, than we currently are doing in order to implement and execute those projects here in the near term, near couple of years. Of course, a lot of that will be developed in our budget process for next fiscal year and long term as we move into with our consultant that we're working with, bringing on board with a new contract at the direction of the board for long-term strategic planning workshops later part of this year. This will be an element of talking about what our long-term strategic plan goals are around these quadrants. So I just want to continue to share this and talk about it. I'll talk about it in far greater details on the ACT meeting on August 10th in the evening. Item number 3. So walked through this a little bit last month, and it's probably worth a little bit of clarification and direction from the board if the board feels appropriate to provide that. I've got our major projects listed on the left here, and I've highlighted a few of them just to get some clarification on, or maybe focus our conversation today on. And then in green, the next column over, short term, next 3 to 6 months, the yellow column, midterm, next 6 to 12 months, and long term, 1 to 3 years. So there are a number of initiatives that are in place right now. I'll start on the left side there, the highlighted one, the airport master plan update. Our last master plan was updated in 2015, approved by the FAA. We have an airport layout plan. It was approved in 2015. We're in the process. Many of you have attended workshops earlier this year on that to provide public input. We're getting to the point where we're still in phase one of the overall scope of work with our contractor working on this. There are some elements in phase one to talk about whether or not we want to move forward on those, whether or not this is going to be an ad hoc committee-led initiative or if this is going to be management-led program. Let me just focus and go down to item number 4 while we're talking about the airport master plan. If you go page down a little bit, please. And hopefully this is easy to read online if you're watching live or later. But certainly this document's available online, so you can blow it up a little bigger. But on here there are 8 different elements of phase 1 schedule. And where we're at on the work completion right now is we're at the point, as it's talked about in the text a little bit lower there in phase 1, of item number 5 as a milestone. And that's really looking at the runway feasibility study. And the runway utilization estimate would be the next paper that comes out as a draft for us to review as a management team and then provide feedback and guidance to our contractor and then bring it back in a final draft format to share with the board, I would suggest, and get board and public input on that. So we can finalize that portion, item number 5 and the milestones there, looking at the airport utilization statistics. And if we are able to do that with our contractor and management review, board review after we go through an initial draft, that'll allow our contract in phase 1 to continue to move forward if we're able to provide guidance back to our vendor, our contractor, Mead & Hunt, to move towards the next step in this and be able to keep moving this process along in phase 1. So I'm going to pause there just for a minute to see if there's any board comments on that or clarifications I can provide.
I'm looking at it and it's showing beginning of August, the noise analysis would be done. So will we see some draft of that at the next board meeting?
They're not going to begin the noise analysis till we finalize the draft of runway utilization study. The next step would be the noise analysis. The current metric of milestones there is probably about a month off, I would say, right now.
So this is out of date?
It is current as of where we're at, but based on a delayed process of timeline with reviewing a draft utilization study, and the board's concerned about, are we going to pause the master plan or are we moving forward? There's a little bit of kind of a pause here. And I've got Brad online with us here today from Mead & Hunt, who possibly could talk to some of these comments as well, if you'd like, from a contractor. He's managing this project for us, and of course, many of you have met him during our town hall forums here.
Yeah, I'd be curious. And in terms of using the term runway utilization, we had a report of runway utilization on 1129 versus 220. So now this is another runway utilization, what we could expect on 1634.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Brad, are you online or able to make any comments on that?
Yeah, I'm here. I trust you can hear me.
We can. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
Directors.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll just say that schedule is probably a month behind. I think I provided that to you for last month's board meeting. And just to answer Director Heatherington's question, the paper in question details the runway use numbers that we would input into the noise and overflight model for our alternative analysis.
So this is something we would probably see at the September board meeting.
I think at the August board meeting would be, I believe Brad already has a draft prepared. I think I've seen the email with, he's prepared to have us review that draft right now. from a management perspective. We can provide feedback to him over the next several weeks and have it at the August board meeting for board review.
Oh, good, okay,
Yeah.
so we would.
So we're ready to move forward on this. Does that sound right, Brad? Is that,
I would say that it's in a state of that the board, if with your discretion, the board could review it now. And this is just in lieu of not having the ad hoc process.
Well, I having been on that ad hoc and then being off that ad hoc, I'd be curious. There's things I like about it, there's things I don't like about it. And the more information I have helps me to decide where I'm going to land on it.
Right.
So for me to see the draft report, if it's available now, and then we could provide you input, that, I'd like that. I don't know how the other.
yeah, and I'm fine with that process as well as providing that to the board independently and collecting that feedback to me so I can discuss that with the staff and provide that feedback as appropriate to our contractor. That I'm absolutely supportive of that. And that would advance the timeline a little bit rather than waiting a whole another month to wait to get board feedback or individual director feedback, right?
I gotta hear yeses or no's. What's there with that look again? Look, he's got that look, doesn't he have that look? David? Oh, did we lose him?
Yeah, no, I'm here. The concern I've got about that is the report is sent to 5 people and 5 people send a comment back or comments back that are conflicting with one another.
Yeah, so I think that's where I get to play referee a little bit based on taking those comments and work with our contractor to incorporate those as appropriate and then bring back a final product for the whole board to review as a board, as an entity, as a public process. And it may not be perfect, but I think it may still advance it a little further down the road without waiting another month for board review. I know it won't be perfect, David. But you may all have the same input. You never know.
Okay.
Okay, and back up to the chart. And thanks, Brad. Appreciate your feedback on that.
Thank you.
Hangar policy is the other one I have highlighted here, just to pause on for a minute. And this is one that there is some in the AVCOM report that talks about our outreaches taking place with the hangar tenants and the feedback we've been getting from them. That's a summary that's included in the report for you all to review. I know the ad hoc committees paused a little bit. I think this is one of those things that there are aspects we can move along, but it's not an absence of having a director of aviation right now. This is one of the ones I would pause a little bit and make it a lower priority into the next midterm process at this point. Flight procedures is the next one I have highlighted here.
Well, Rob, can we pause on that one for a second? Because I did have a comment about it. It mixed in with the item 4 thing about the dissolution of that ad hoc. My question to you about, like, if we did away with the hangar policy ad hoc, which is Rick and myself, I would like to know what your plan is and what your scope is for visiting the hangar use policy. Just because it's, as we learned when we got into it, it's a huge topic.
Yes.
And it's not something that could be all digested at once. It's definitely something that has to be prioritized. And we were at odds with previous management as to whether we even had an issue. And when I say we, I think at least 4 out of 5 board members felt that we had an issue that we wanted to look into and solve. So I don't know how the rest of the board would feel about it. I would like, before we made that decision about what happens on that, I'd like to know what you wanted to address in your control of that process.
Yeah, that's a really fair comment, David, and I'm happy to come back next month and outline the process and the topics that I think need to be addressed and in what order moving forward for discussion.
Is that Rick? Is that good with you?
I would like to hear that from you, Rob, because I think the reason that the hangar ad hoc was set up is we really couldn't get management to focus on it. And I'd like you to focus on it, and I don't really need to have an ad hoc personally if you're getting on the situation.
Yeah, I'm happy for management to do this work. I don't think the board members need to volunteer to do these things as extra work, as I've talked before. So happy to do that. And for the first next stage, again, I don't think that in absence of a critical staff member, I don't think it's the most pressing issue right now, but I'm happy next month to bring back and kind of shape how I'm looking at it for you all.
Rob,
I think there's things to work on here, right?
Could we take a quick bio break?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll take a 5-10 minute pause. Great.
Director Diamond?
Yep.
Oh, great.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. Flight procedures I was on, this is an update. We have an existing contract relationship with Flight Tech to develop flight procedures. There's a number of steps in that agreements. I'm working with Flight Tech and Meet and Hunt, who has graciously provided some staff time of Hardy Bullock under Meet and Hunt under a separate contract I'm looking at to help provide some feedback to us in this process. I'll have more to report on that in the next board meeting, but I'm looking at looking at that planned schedule that's in place, the work that's been done, what needs to happen next, and then be able to slowly walk through that process. It's already outlined to be moving forward next, and have more in-depth report for you this next month for flight procedures. But I plan on providing a greater update in August when I have more of a chance to dive in deeper with Flight Tech on that plan and on that contract, and see what we can move forward over the next couple of months, knowing that some of it is very long timeline stuff that will take a better part of 6 months to 12 months to actually get after. Any thoughts or feedback on that from the directors? I know you've seen this for some time now on flight procedures. I've got a lot of years of notes on it.
So,
hey Rob, this was item 6, and item 5 was the landing fee. We didn't talk about that.
oh, we're still on 3.
I've got the landing fee next, so I'll jump into.
We're on 3.
Oh, I thought you were just talking about flight procedures on 6. Item 6, sorry.
I just, when they come to to do those flight procedures, can we go for a ride? Party said I could.
I'll see what's available with that.
Well, partially to see what it's like from
Line
the
of
vantage
procedures,
point
right.
of the aircraft
Yep.
and the neighborhoods. That's part of it, plus I think it's,
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind and try to coordinate that as best possible with directors that are available and interested in if there's capacity in the aircraft.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that was item 6, yes, flight procedures. Let me jump back to 5. Sorry, the numbering of that didn't correspond with I was off on my graph here. So landing fees, ramp fees, the board provided guidance back in April, I believe, this year, about moving from a transient use fee here at this airport, which is unique to Truckee only, to more of an industry standard landing fee and ramp fee. Management team has been working with a variety of folks to analyze what the right scale of landing fee would be for an airport of our size compared to other similar airports in industry. We've been reaching out to some of the industry organizations to socialize this concept without putting a price on it yet. We are working also with Vector, who we currently have a relationship with our airport camera system in place now, that has a system and a program across a lot of airports where they actually manage the landing fee billing and tracking and reporting and reimbursement back to airports. We talked to them extensively about the types of models that are out there for landing fees. There's a number of them. And then internally, we're looking at what a ramp fee would be and how the two of those together would replace the transient use fee and what that would look like. I expect by the August board meeting to have those numbers pretty well dialed in, to be able to share with the board and share with the members of the community what that looks like and how we would exempt our local hangar tenants from that. It's really meant to be for folks coming and going out of here that aren't necessarily permanently stationed here at this airport in the way of aircraft. And there were some initial projections on what that would produce in revenue. I'm not sure if those are perfect, but we're looking at those, and those are the type of targets in order to recoup a lot of our infrastructure impact that takes place from the air traffic in and out of the airport here on a regular basis. And I will, unless there's comments on those items, I will stop there and turn it over to Josh next for item 7, and then Kat on item 8.
Thanks, Rob. So 7, we just wanted to provide a reminder about PI 119. And this is the specific campaign disclosure policy that the board adopted a number of years ago. The PI is in the packet. I'm always happy to answer any specific questions, but just generally, it requires that if there will be a contested election, we post a link to the Secretary of State website, which hosts all of the campaign contributions for candidates for the board on our website. So there'd be a link on the homepage to the Secretary of State website, which has all the contribution information. We'll get that posted once we have confirmation as all who's running, and I believe the filing period closes August 12th, so likely around that time period. And then going forward on the disclosure piece, that's specific to board members at meetings. The PI requires disclosure in 3 instances. The first 2 relate to situations where a director has received campaign contributions from someone who is appearing before you on essentially an item that uniquely affects them, or someone who is appearing in opposition or support of an item that uniquely affects someone else. In those cases, if you've received a campaign contribution from any of those people of over $250, you need to disclose that at the meeting where the item is considered. And this doesn't apply to items that affect hangar tenants, essentially. There also is a disclosure requirement going forward. And so if you receive a campaign contribution from someone after their item is considered by the board for a 3-month period afterwards, at the next regular board meeting during board announcements, you need to disclose that campaign contribution. And again, items affecting hangar tenants are excluded. And then the last part of the policy is just a reminder that this was a decision by this board to provide additional transparency in these instances. And so, we all, of course, are still subject to the normal conflict of interest rules, which may require you to actually recuse yourself in certain situations if you have a financial interest. But of course, campaign contributions are not a financial interest for you while you're sitting as airport directors. If this does impact anyone who's running for the board in the next couple of months, and you have any specific questions about how that might affect your unique situation, as you know, I'm always available. Please reach out and I can help provide some guidance on the PI. Thank you.
And that's guidance to not only board member candidates, but other candidates, correct?
No, so the PI in this instance only applies to board members. So
okay.
The advice will be limited to board members. Candidates do not have the same disclosure requirements.
Thank you.
I have a question. What about, is it any kind of conflict for a sitting board member to donate to someone running for re-election?
It is not. So, you do not give up your, First Amendment rights. Essentially that's what it is by being on the board. So you have the ability, if you wish, to donate to any candidate, including a city board member's election, and you also have the ability, if you wish, to publicly support someone. The only thing that we would, ask, and I think we've talked about it in the past, is all of these, of course, donations as well as any support are done in your personal capacity and not, of course, on behalf of the district itself.
I have a question. So the policy doesn't apply to, only applies to the board. If someone is elected and then has a financial interest do they have to report?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer would be yes under item 4. So if there was a candidate who's not currently on the board who was elected, they would be subject, once they are elected, to that 3-month look back period. And if someone who is a campaign contributor to them came forward and fell within the policy, they would need to disclose that at that time.
Okay.
Elected or sworn in?
The policy just refers to a board member, so it'd be sworn in.
Any other questions for Josh? Okay. Where are we? Oh, is there public comment? Thank you. Okay. Truckee Tahoe Airport District Scholarship. That's me. I've been.
Make sure microphones are on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been in touch with Phyllis at the Community Foundation, and I've been reaching out to various people in the community, including Preston Parrish, who came last month to speak about STEM and STEAM, and actually got to meet him at the air show. And he and I are meeting later this week. He had a certifying flight yesterday, I think, so he was pretty busy. But I'm trying to gather some information about what's most useful to locals who want to go into an aviation career. And one of the things that I've noticed in doing research is that a lot of these aviation scholarships, particularly when kids are in school at the same time, are not 4-year scholarships because they need a commitment. They feel like they need the kid to commit to doing this very hard work of becoming a pilot, and need to show some skin into the game. And actually, some of the schools have you load up the first year or two with all your general requirements before you really get into the aviation piece of it. And the scholarship program at TTCF is that we have set up now is specific to high school seniors. And so they apply as the senior. They have to be going to school the next year. If they take a gap year, they're not eligible for a scholarship generally. So this year, a donor gave TTCF some money for the kind of scholarship for vocation, or for a kid going back to school, or a kid transferring from community college to 4-year school. And those kids generally don't have access to the scholarships that the high school seniors have. And they just ran a scholarship process. It just, I guess it closes at the end of the month. And they may have some money left over, and they may run another scholarship process like that in the fall. And so she was interested in talking to me about the money that we set aside for aviation, because I think that the people that we're looking at, who are dedicated to going into aviation career, probably don't know that at the end of high school, that that's what they want to do. So we're continuing to explore that, and we may be able to put something together at the end of this year and get it out into the community before the fiscal year's over. Questions?
Well, we had set money in the budget.
We
like
did.
20 grand or something, didn't we?
Yes, we did. So we have 20 grand for this year.
Yeah.
And then we have the budget process coming up. But
Great.
if we could get it out before the end of the year, it would be really impactful, I think.
Yeah.
And we're looking at careers, so it's not just flight school, it's, mechanics and air traffic control, and a lot of those are really expensive.
And is this the linkage for the kids who've been out 2 years, not right out of high school?
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Good, thanks for working it.
Yeah. I hope we can get some money out into the local community.
And it's neat that this other person set this up for a vocation, for these other
Exactly,
kids
yeah,
later.
it's just
That's pretty neat that
circumstance.
that person-
Yeah, that was
is
cool. Any questions, Rick, David?
No.
Okay. All right, so that's the status of that moving
Yeah,
forward.
thank you for covering that.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't have all the background. Appreciate it, Kathy.
Yeah.
Item 9 is just a kind of a reminder for all the hangar tenants that are out there, is that according to the individual leases, that agreements that are in place for each of those hangars, there's 2 different ones based on what row you're in, as detailed in the report here. The consumer price index rate increase annually, we look back at June. The rate increase that would go into effect September 1st is outlined there at 8.5%. And we'll be contacting and notifying all of our hangar folks via the option they've elected for notification to remind them that this is going in place. This happens annually, and this is just a notification so it doesn't catch folks by surprise. Just to remind everybody, this is the time of year that we remind folks that rents potentially would go up based on CPI, Consumer Price Index, and we'll be notifying those, and of course the billing will change appropriately in September as it does every year.
I have a question about the November and Papa, the two super exec hangars, and I did not understand the annual adjustment. What does that mean? You know, do they not get CPI?
They get adjusted annually based on CPI in September 1st.
So why is it held out different as 5.2 versus 5.
The language in the two different agreements is slightly different, but essentially it's there for people would know exactly what is in their agreement. They are worded slightly differently, and that's maybe part of the hangar use update policy is kind of getting those aligned over the long term. But right now there were two different agreements that were drafted over time, and so they have a little bit different language, but the same terms essentially of rates going up on 1 September based on CPI.
So the CPI for June was the 8.5, but it will be
Yes, ma'am.
applied on September 1.
Applied on September 1,
And
right.
every year, okay.
Right.
That
Well,
was
just for this year. Next year it'll be whatever the CPI is.
whatever the CPI
right?
is, but the
Right.
clarity.
For June. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And just in terms of the FBO fees comparison, well, that's part of hangar policy. You'll be
Yeah, that's part of the
addressing
hangar
that.
policy we'll be looking at to see where we're at with all that.
And how it tied into that FBO rent study and where we were comparative to other locations that were checked. I'm assuming
Right.
you'll be checking into that.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Can I just clarify one thing? It's approved for September, we reach out, and then the billing actually takes effect.
Say that again, please.
The billing takes effect in October, because we
Okay.
have to do a month out, a month of now.
Yeah, thank you.
But it's for September rent, but.
They'll get the bill in October.
Yeah, got it. It's just the way it read, I didn't think it was, they were subject to CPI, and that didn't make sense.
I have a comment on this, and Josh, I don't know if I can make it as a board director or if I'm going to make it in a public comment because I'm a hangar tenant. What do you advise? I can't hear what's happening.
I'm thinking, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was pausing, so I had a chance to kind of think through this one.
Is it leased under a director or is it?
Yeah, so Director Diamond, I'd be comfortable with you making a comment as a director. I think when we looked at this previously on the conflict of interest rules, you don't have a conflict because it's a public generally exception.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to basically make the same comment I made last year. This time last year, we had just extended a jet fuel discount that we were calling a locals discount. And I argued that locals, more locals were using avgas for their piston aircraft than were actually using Jet A for turbine or piston aircraft that actually use Jet A. And at that time as a board, we talked about, well, we'll look into that. And I object to this automatic every year rent increase because I feel like we had an allocation study that showed a lot of areas where we could be looking at and we did not look at them. And we're now, here we are into almost into August, and we had that study last December, I think it was, that we first saw the draft of that. And in my opinion, we've not really taken it seriously. We did a rent study, we looked into these things, we started going down the road of taking that seriously, and then we backed off on that and said, oh, no, we're not going to actually do anything about that. of any consequence for a few years, possibly. And I just want to go on the record as saying, it's like this is an easy rent increase every year. We just say, like, click the switch and the rent goes up. But I don't feel like we are treating piston pilots the same that we're treating turbine pilots. We don't have a fuel discount for piston pilots. And I realize that for full serve avgas, we are at a deficit of $4.21 a gallon. This is horrific. I understand that. So we don't have a lot of margins to move on that. But I do feel like we have inequity between extending a discount to those who are consuming Jet A, who are most likely actually in those two hangar rows that Mary talked about, and those of us in these other hangar rows that get this automatic rent increase that are on avgas, still not with a quote-unquote locals discount for fuel, which we did talk about looking into. So I know it'll pass, or that it's just going to happen, but this is my objection. I just want to go on the record for another year in saying that.
Thank you, David.
I guess that does tie into the cost allocation and if we're ever going to have a discussion about it or not.
And just a reminder, I think we had 23 folks on local program that utilize Jet A. The vast majority are fuel customers. 100 low load customers. Does that sound right?
There's currently 23 people getting, or hangar tenants that are getting the Jet A locals discount. 23, that's it.
To remind me, that's $1.63 a gallon, or $1.83, or $1.38?
$1.38 off per gallon.
Off of a gallon. Which, when we get to the fuel thing.
And I just, to go on record, I'm not specifically objecting to those 23 people getting a locals discount. What I'm objecting to is calling it a locals discount that only applies to 23 people. That's my objection. I think that doesn't make any sense. And if you looked at the type of aircraft those 23 are flying, they are probably the least likely to even need a discount. Just wanted to go on the record saying that.
Items number 10, 11, and 10, 11 are in your board books and published online. If there's any questions about those are mostly presentation information, just updates. If there's not questions on 10, 11, I'll move to 12 to finance. Yep.
Hey, sorry, Rob, I do have just a few comments
Sure.
on item 10. I did read through all of those comments that we got back. Quite a bit of comments back there.
And this is on the hangar tenant outreach for those who aren't reading this, is what David's commenting on.
Yeah, right. For the Fly Quiet third tier,
right?
Incentive program. And again, I get now. I'm speaking as a director, but I'm also speaking as a pilot. I did mention this the first time we talked about this, and I think there was not a lot of interest in this. I do feel like for the sake of safety, we do need some sort of and it could be based on density altitude, but we need to have some sort of a recognition that in some circumstances, particularly in summer months, aircraft should leave earlier because it is definitely safer for them to do so. And I think that if we do base it on meteorological conditions, we know the density altitude of the field. If we say that the density altitude is X number of feet by 6:30 a.m., you can leave because we know it's going to heat up and it's going to get dangerous quickly. I would be in favor of something like that. And then I also wonder on an exemption, I think some people refer to it as the get out of jail free card. If we're going down the road with the landing fees with being able to track aircraft that are coming in for the fees, couldn't we also be tracking tail numbers to determine when somebody has left out of the density out, or excuse me, fly quiet, that we can cross-reference that with meteorological conditions to know that we've got that situation. And then if we do have a get-out-of-jail-free thing, we can use that system maybe to monitor that. And then perhaps also making it based on a percentage of total operations. So for example, if somebody only flies 3 times a year and 2 of those times they leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe this is not what we're looking for. But if somebody is flying 7 days a week, and then twice a month they had to leave early out of that. I just feel like we should be a little bit more creative about the exceptions for that, for the parameters of that.
That's great feedback. Thank you, David.
I also have some comments. Have you gone through it? Yeah. I saw this survey and I read every comment, and I was curious in terms of what's your approach with this now, because I read it and I actually took a tab on each page in terms of who's okay with it, who wants their to get out of jail card freeze, and who hated it. And I added it up, and there were 16 responses out of, and I added out of both, so 19 plus 35 is 54 people. 16 were fine with it. There were 5 that wanted to get out of jail card and 8 who didn't like it. So to me, that says that there was many people who thought it was fine. And I think this would be good. I'd like 8 cents per square foot going to a hangar tenant to acknowledge the 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So I would like to see this instituted. The other thing that we did this survey reaching out to the pilot community, but I was wondering if we did a survey monkey to the 250 records of people who are commenters, to say, what do you think of this idea? Because they're our customers too. And they might have input that would weigh in. If we're going to only go one way, that doesn't seem to be a fair analysis. So, I mean, I'm ready to say do the 3 fly quiet and not do home base. But if we're going to kick the can, then I would say we need to do outreach to the public who has commented and ask them what their opinion is. So I'm putting that to the board, because this isn't a decision point. You're going to come back. Then the other thing that really got to me was I was quoted in one of the comments with, and people can say whatever they want. I'm a public official. We all know nationally people can lie. That's okay. People can say whatever they want to say. But when somebody puts my name and puts a quote around it and it's not true, I have to stand up and say this is not true. And it really, this is commenter 16. I have no idea who this person is. But for them to call out a quote and tell me this would be nothing I ever said. If I'm the person who actually started to push Kevin to do a pavement management plan, to do infrastructure, if I'm the person who said, why aren't we doing that hangar row roof? When other board members were saying, well, yeah, it's expensive, let's not do it. This really gets my goat. And I can't let it just stand.
I see we have Jill online. Jill, did you have any comments about the survey or other thoughts?
I think the survey shows that there's a wide variety of feelings on. Some really like the current program and feel that it works very well, and some feel that a 10 to 7 incentive could also work very well. I also think that, in speaking to some of what Director Diamond said, there is some tenants or some of the pilot community felt that maybe just not instituting a 3rd level, but evaluating the program in a more creative way could provide some greater adherence, and kind of, taking, I guess, creative could be a word, used, or just kind of approach to see what is the ultimate goal. I do think that there are tenants that do not fly in between those periods regardless, and so a discount on their hangar rent was very attractive. And is that really changing behavior in a way that is positively affecting the community. I think that's something to consider. And I think those individuals that brought, rethinking it in a different way, maybe that was something to consider there.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate that. Any other comments on Fly Quiet 3 policy?
So what happens? I mean, are you going to come back with a new idea for this, or is this?
Yeah, I'll take the survey results, your feedback here today, and sit down with the team and think about how we would recommend implementation along with the landing fee, along with the ramp fee. I think David's comments I take is something, the way I look at the whole picture of how we're doing things here when it comes to fees and programs. These all three tie together, I would say, and as much as we can align some of these, that would be great. So I would expect to bring this back at the August board meeting for a recommendation for implementation.
When was the survey done with the Survey Monkey?
Jill, are you still on? You have the dates when the survey? Yeah.
Yeah, the Survey Monkey was actually done, I believe, in the late April timeframe with Hardy. He was really the driver of that. And then the other, there was direct outreach through an email to the hangar tenants and the pilot community as well, and that was done. The survey was done first, the email requesting feedback was done second.
I think there would be value in doing a Survey Monkey to every one of those emails of people who have commented in the past. I would like to see that if you're going to include this. I think it is information that could be valuable to you in developing this. I would propose that.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment.
And Rob, if I could just throw one other final thought onto that. I would also really, I think pilots would appreciate this too, just the concept of quiet routing. So if you're, like, for example, if you're going to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning off runway 29, you're going to wake up a lot of people. But if you leave off runway 11 and make a left turn to the bug station and a left turn to the bug station and follow the freeway out to the west, you're going to get to a higher altitude that's not going to be as impactful to people. So maybe when we're talking about the concept of breaking curfew, we might have some sort of a provision for routing that doesn't bother people, so that people can get in and out of the region. Because I do feel for the pilots, especially the ones who are arriving at night, who are saying that, there's weather issues and I'm going to be arriving after curfew and I couldn't have planned for this and something came in. I just feel like it's some flexibility in that could go a long way, whether it's percentage of flight operations, the quiet routing, or the other concept, which I is total pie in the sky, but imagine if we had no fly quiet program at all. And the way that we rewarded people for being good neighbor pilots is at the end of the year, if there were no noise complaints for their tail number, they got a bonus back on their hangar rent. That's why I'm thinking just in terms of like let's reevaluate this entire thing, and we might end up finding something more creative that's.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Dave. That's the way I think about it, is simplicity. The more complex we make this tracking day to day, week to week, I think sometimes the harder it is, and think about it a little differently as an end of year or semi-annually. Of recognizing those who are not violating as a way of rewarding them. Absolutely, I think it's good to be thinking about it that way. We got David Van Quest online. David, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You got any thoughts or feedback at this point on this as well?
No, Jill did touch on a good point, is that a big percentage of our hangar tenants just don't fly too often, and so the Fly Quiet 3 might sound really attractive to some of those tenants, and in the end, it may not make too big of a net difference. I think that some of our power users, they're currently signed up with Fly Quiet 1, and so offering a Fly Quiet 3 might not incentivize them to switch. So that's just kind of some things worth evaluating in this idea.
Great, thanks, David.
You know, and the idea that at the end of the year you get a bonus if your tail number doesn't, we all know that people have stopped calling in. You know, they've said it. You've done it, David, DVQ's done surveys. People say, I just don't bother calling in. And if you get woken up at 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning, and you're just, and then you in the morning, and then, you know, oh, I forgot to call in. So we have to, you know, it's an interesting idea, but it needs some flesh around it.
Yeah, the way I think about it, and the way I'm looking at it internally here is with a vector kind of system that an ADSB, we have the data, we'll have the data. We don't have to wait for a report of violation.
Okay.
We'll know automatically people flying outside of parameters. And maybe that's a way to address this in a different way rather than waiting for complaints. Right?
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to item number 12, Finance and Administration Department report. Kelly?
Good evening. I trust you've all read through the year-to-date financials. I just want to give you a few quick updates. Year-to-date total revenue, we were at 7.5 million.
Will we be going back to DVQ's report and some of this other stuff before we get into financials? I'm sorry, I missed it.
We could take comments on DVQ's report. He's still online. I'm sure he'd be happy to address those if we want to pause financials for a minute.
I saw the 1 a.m. arrival and departure that was not an emergency. What type of an aircraft was it?
I believe that was it's called a West Wind. It's a kind of mid-size, well, small, like business jet size aircraft.
Okay. And was it the same aircraft that it came in, did a drop, and then took off again?
Yeah.
Yeah. And their route when they used it, did they go off 11, 29, 20, what?
I want to say it was an arrival and a departure on 29.
Okay, arrival on 29. And were there calls on that?
I can't recall off the top of my head.
That's my concern, that things happen at 1 a.m. and either maybe you got lucky and slept through it, but maybe you just were like, didn't.
Yeah, I think with using a new system of tracking, we'll definitively, I think we know that when we'll get a regular report.
All right, it was not a jet, it was a Cessna 421. It's a twin engine piston aircraft.
Okay.
And at 29 and left 29.
Okay.
Same company that also operates a jet that has flown in during curfew.
Okay, so arrival on 29, it's not as waking up many people, but a departure off 29 is going to be over people. The other comment is on the new flyers. I liked your new maps that you developed for 1-1 and 2 for 1-1 and for 2-0 departure, or for, yeah.
2.
You've got the 2 different maps, but we have other departures, and I would think, why can't we have a departure for 1-1 and 1 for 2-0? I mean, it's not used commonly, but I've been out here at the airport and seen aircraft go off on 2-0, and that's my comment would be, why can't we develop similar maps to what you have in here?
Yeah, we can. When someone goes off of 2-0, they're typically told by ATC to make a left 270 and then fly the bypass departure. We could just as easily make a new poster for that one as well. And then kind of same goes for 1-1. When it does get used, you kind of fly the runway 2 procedure off of 1-1.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is developing something off of 1-1 that is also another departure that, you know, that was that whole development for the emergency landing areas. That's a positive thing, but by showing another departure, we have 4 potential users, not just 2. And by having this literature out there, it implies that there's only 2. And what I'm saying is we should have all 4 opportunities addressed. That's what I would like to see. Is that doable?
Great, I'll discuss that with staff and see what that looks like.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for going back. This is why I'm a paper queen, so that I can, I've got my list here to go through.
Over to Finance and Accounting, Kelly again.
Thank you.
Hi again. Still at 7.5 million year to date, 115,000 over budget in revenue, and bottom line year to date 932,000, 1.1 million ahead of last year. And just a fun fact, because I like fun facts. July FBO sales are within 13,000 of hitting $1 million, which is our biggest month ever. So great work to those guys out there.
Awesome.
Any questions?
They're awesome stats. I mean, that's great. We're making more money.
With decreased volume from last year.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Kelly?
My only question was looking at net revenue divided by gallons sold. We made $1.36 on 100 low lead and $2.86 per gallon of jet fuel net. And that's net revenue, which doesn't take into account expenses, the time it takes to truck it out there and deliver it.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep going back to the cost allocation, because revenue is great. I mean, in your business, it's not just revenue, you have expenses. So we always have to, when we talk about revenue, we have to compare it to expenses.
No question.
Okay.
And we're making
On revenue.
150,000, I don't know.
115 over budget on revenue. And what were our expenses? Were they?
Bottom line,
We don't know.
yes, you just said it.
900,000.
How much?
932,000. And that $1 million in revenue is
Subtracting.
from the FBO alone.
That included, that's subtracting expenses. That's just revenue.
Net income is 932.
Okay.
And that's after expenses.
Correct.
That's
With
what
less
net- That's what net means.
You got it.
Thank you.
932.
Great. Thanks,
After
Kelly.
deducting
Anything else?
Depreciation. After deducting depreciation.
Right,
That's-
so that's a paper loss. Add that back in and we're
But
making
what
even more
does
money.
that take into account, all the expenses of staff and maintenance on buildings and everything?
Bottom line.
Good, great, thanks.
And in my world, you add back in depreciation to see what you're reading.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Kelly. So we finished with the general manager's report, tab 12. Is there any public comment on anything that we discussed? I know it was long, and thank you for your patience for letting us get through it. Chris Henderson.
Hi, and thank you for taking the comment. Just a quick note on the fly quiet programs. It seems that anything that reduces noise at inopportune hours would be well accepted by the public. And so the idea of the get out of jail free card seems to be one that is worth exploring. I know there's the risk that we don't have significant better parse who's eligible for that. We don't want our people that are already not flying at those hours getting even more substantial hangar discounts and not getting any benefit for it. But it does seem that that sort of limited leniency would allow for the people who indicated resistance to that sort of program in the public comment section or in the polling section to maybe come around to it, and perhaps we could get a benefit to the community on noise reduction. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Todd, you have a comment?
Hi, thank you. I'm actually also going to comment on the fly quiet and get out free card, jail free. I do not agree with that. I know for my own personal feelings, you give me any kind of get out of jail free card, and I'm not going to work as hard. So I don't believe in that policy that we should give people leniency. I do believe in safety, and I take Director Diamond's comments seriously about flying conditions. And I also would support his recommendation of potentially directing towards specific runways versus flying right over our homes. And Mary, specifically to the comment that you brought up, the flight at 2 in the morning, it woke me up. But if I'm not already awake with insomnia and working, it is too much effort with your current reporting system to log on, enter all of my information. I got to give you my email, my address, write out the complaints. And if by that point in time, you know, I have to go to FlightAware to try and find the tail number to get all of that reported, 2 in the morning, given your current reporting system, not favorable to us to give you those comments. That's why you don't hear from people like me very often at 2 in the morning. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for it.
Thank you, Todd. Looks like Tom has a comment.
Oh, yeah. So far, I've heard about 35 different little cubby holes to make, okay, look, we can do it this way for this guy, and this way with this guy, and this guy, and this, and oh, gee whiz, and golly, maybe we can put restrictions on people who don't understand or people who supposedly don't understand the effects of density altitude. When I got up here, I had about 500 hours. I had gotten all of my certificates and ratings in the Bay Area. When I got up here, in the first 6 months of my regular flying, I learned to fly. When people are baby pilots here, it's the norm. Density altitude is the norm, and dealing with it is the norm. And the way the things is set up right now, with clock, okay, 6:30, I can deal with taking off at 6:31. Doesn't bother me a lick. But say, hey, you gotta wait till 7 o'clock, or we're going to take away your reduction in your being based here. That's pretty mean. And there's going to be times where I'm going to want to go out at 6:30, but if I'm limited to 7, I can ask for special dispensation there. And if I get it, I get it. If I don't, then I'm late to where I'm going to. The program is good as is, and I would make the you got to read my comment. Another 2% on top of the 2%, 4% for those of us who pay taxes to Nevada County, unsecured property taxes on our airplanes. I just got the bill 2 days ago, and I said, what the heck? How did this get so big? It wasn't that big last year. It gets bigger every year, but there's a big leap. So anyway, leave it alone. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, any other public comment? All right. Future agenda priorities and meeting management.
So we have the rolling agenda in there. I won't review all that now. I do have some additions based on comments today from the board and discussions that we'll be adding to the rolling agenda, mostly for August. We have feedback from Mary we'll be looking at additional mapping opportunities to document some of the things that she was talking about with DBQ. Looking at Fly Quiet Tree program, landing fees, ramp fees for August, a plan for kind of bracketing the hangar use policy going forward. We'll be talking about that in August. Looking and contacting the TART folks as a topic potentially of bus impact on the neighborhood that was discussed earlier, and also working with the rec district and contacting TTSA and looking for opportunities of what we might be able to do, exploring other land opportunities there that the rec district is looking at. Those are the topics I have based on the meeting, other than what we already have on the rolling agenda.
Awesome. Did any staff or board member go to a conference this last month? Want to report on that? Okay. Meeting review and direction to staff. It looks like you just covered that.
The only other thing I had was the greenhouse gas information that used to be on our website is not there anymore, and I'm wondering if that can be on there again. I was on the website and didn't see it.
I'll look into that. I'm not sure what happened to it, if it was there before or not now, but certainly part of the past study and something that should be there. And
well, something that
we should have a communication plan around that.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, are there any other board member announcements, Rick?
I'd just like to say how nice it was to have Jessica Fay here in person. I know you've been on Zoom, but it's nice to see your face.
Nice to be here.
All right, so we have a special board meeting next, is that Tuesday? Next Tuesday at 1:30. It's open to the public. Another special board meeting on August 24th at 1, ahead of the regular board meeting at 4:30 on August 24th. It's a budget workshop. Yes? Yeah, the 1 o'clock, yeah. And I think that's it. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Director Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
Director Odette.
Yes.
Director Rolfe.
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.